Forget what you learned in school. Never mind what your parents told you, and disregard what your friends say. From now on, the only people you need to listen to are these guys. For the next several minutes, they'll take you on a journey through the political jungle. And when your journey is over and you're safe at home, they promise you'll be stronger, smarter, and just plain better. So buckle up, hang on to your ears, because your journey starts now.
When we vote this November, let's all remember, let's vote for Kennedy. Make him your selection in the Senate election. He'll do more for you and me. Look at Kennedy's history. You'll see it's no mystery why he suits us to a T. He's your kind of man, so do all that you can and vote for Kennedy.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Great words from a president if you don't actually think about what he's saying there.
Yeah, I know it. It's well, I'm not going to go into that. That's a little clue as to our guest this evening. I want to welcome you to another show, At Odds, with Nate and Brian. That was Nate earlier. This is me now. We're broadcasting from the back room of the Bat and Balls pub and studio, only because it's, opening day was yesterday in baseball.
It was.
It was. And the Tigers won. Detroit Tigers won, so that's great. And we're in a small northern village in what country, Nate?
Well, we're in the USA today, in Massachusetts,
It
actually.
is great.
So, all the things are just lining up to foreshadow what we're going to talk about.
If you don't know who we're going to talk about or what we're going to talk about, you're just not in the know. Well, today's show, we'll give you a clue, is author and attorney Jack Duffy. We're going to discuss his science fiction alternate history book, The Man from 2063. We'll talk about his book, and we'll talk about the Kennedy assassination. Jack's one of the leading, probably experts on the Kennedy assassination, so don't go away. We also want to remind you that you can call in at 248-455-ODDS. That's 248-455-6337. Like us on Facebook and visit our website at www.atoddshow.com. I want to say that Jack Duffy is a trial attorney from Fort Worth, Texas. He spent the last 40 years researching the important facts surrounding the JFK assassination. Now, that work includes interviewing several key witnesses that were part of the assassination investigating, including some of the doctors who treated Kennedy at Parkland Hospital and the wife of Lee Harvey Oswald. He has collected and read almost every book on the JFK murder and has one of the largest private collections on the assassination. Mr. Duffy's book, as I mentioned, The Man from 2063, is about a lawyer who travels through time back to 1963 and prevents a well-organized conspiracy from killing President Kennedy. The book draws on Mr. Duffy's deep knowledge and personal research and is therefore based on actual events and people surrounding the assassination. We'd like to welcome Jack Duffy to At Odds. Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on your show tonight.
Well, you're more than welcome.
Our pleasure, for sure.
Hey, why don't you start out by just telling us a little bit about your book, why you wrote it, and the research that went into it.
Well, I've been studying the Kennedy case for, like you said, 40 years, so I was always interested in it from even when I was a young child. I remember where I was when Kennedy was shot. I was in elementary school on November 22nd, 1963 in Fort Worth. And once I saw the Spreaker film in 1972 at a friend's house, I knew, in my opinion, that there was a conspiracy because I still believe the film proves another shot from the front. Of course, that's all a big debate even today, though. But assuming that that's what happened, then that's what got my curiosity about the whole thing, and then I started researching it from that point forward, and I haven't stopped since. I decided to write a book about 15 years ago because I always wanted to write something about this fascinating murder mystery, because to me it is a mystery. rather than just rehash what's already been written up there by 500 other people on the nonfiction side, I decided why not take a new spin on this and what if you could go back in time and actually see what really happened and maybe even prevent it from happening? Because that's what I would do if I could go back in time. I'd really like to know the truth once and for all about what really did happen. So I decided to incorporate that into a nonfiction, factual background and throw in fictional characters to kind of play out a scenario that I think quite likely might have happened on November 22nd, 63.
Now, you drew a lot of this material from your own personal collection. What are some of the things that you have as far as memorabilia?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Probably almost every book, pro and anti-conspiracy, has been written on the case. I've got the entire Warren Commission volumes, the 26 volumes that came out in 1964. I've got the House Committee report that came out in 79. Videos, DVDs, lots of photographs, lots of magazines. You can name it. I've pretty much got it in my collection somewhere.
Now, do you have some original pieces of that time period? What would be some of your best pieces of memorabilia?
Oh, I've got the original, Life magazines that came out in the 60s about the assassination. Of course, the original Warren Commission report, which you can't get anymore. I've got the actual volumes, which are impossible to find now unless you get them on the internet, I guess, for a huge price.
Right.
Those are extremely rare. I've got a lot of the original books that came out in the 60s, which are almost out. They're all out of print now, very hard to find. Just a lot of things that are very valuable to me that would be hard to replace if I ever lost them. So there's quite a lot of stuff. It's taken 40 years to collect all this stuff, so it's quite a big collection.
Now, you stated in your bio that your parents were actually at the luncheon?
No, at the breakfast.
At the breakfast,
yeah. President Kennedy gave his final speech at a breakfast that morning in Fort Worth, and my parents were invited to go hear him. And my father was a doctor at the time. He's deceased now, but I remember him telling me that Kennedy walked within a few feet of him, and my dad was kind of worried about him going to Dallas because of all the bad publicity that had been going on around about him coming to Dallas. As you know, Dallas was not a very popular city with Kennedy.
Right, absolutely.
And my father was concerned. He didn't think he was going to get killed, but he was just concerned that they might try to do something to embarrass him there. And he told me he almost said something to President Kennedy when he walked right by him about going to Dallas, but he decided not to. So.
Wow, that's kind of I'm getting goosepimples. That's kind of eerie and kind of weird. So your dad was a Kennedy fan?
Well, I didn't really ask him about that. I don't know if he voted for Kennedy. I think my dad was more of a Republican most of his life, so I don't know if he voted for Nixon or not. But I never did ask him. But
well, he was just there because it was the president, and it was, yeah.
Right.
So he was just being patriotic and a piece of history there.
Well, plus Kennedy and my dad were about the same age, and they'd both been in World War II in the Navy. Not at the same time, but I mean they were in the World War II in the Navy, but not on the same ship or anything. But they served in the Navy at the same time.
So they were comrades in arms there.
Right.
And both Navy people.
Right.
Now, in your book, I mean, we didn't really talk about your book, but we can now. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and it seems like when I read it, and I'm going from memory, but it seems like you sort of brought the 3 to 4 major conspiracies, and I'm going to say that was, that the mob might have done it. That's one of the things. The CIA, they did it. Cuba somehow was involved.
Right.
And those were the kind of, am I right? That's about the 3 sort of.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of hard evidence that supports all 3 of those groups, or elements of those 3 groups being involved. That's why I chose that thesis. And
you left out, LBJ did it. And the Russians did it, and aliens did it, but
right.
So
right. There's lots of theories about who did it. I just feel like the hardest evidence and the strongest evidence supports organized crime, people connected with the CIA, and anti-Castro Cubans being involved in it.
Well, yeah, you and I both know that the mob really didn't like Bobby, and they were getting a lot of heat from him.
Right, exactly.
Some elements in the CIA were maybe not happy with some of the policies that he was doing.
Yes.
I think. When did Bay of Pigs, and then we had that was what? How recent was that before he was shot?
Well, the Bay of Pigs was in April 1961.
Yeah, that was early on.
He had only been president for a few months when that happened, and then of course the Cuban Missile Crisis happened in October of '62.
Yeah.
And then after that, a year later, he got killed. So.
Now, what about the Russians? I mean, that was one thing that they talked about that might have been involved, but you didn't really touch on that too much.
My own personal opinion is I just don't think the Soviet Union would have killed Kennedy. I think that would have been crazy. Like I don't believe Cuba killed Kennedy, because I think that would have been equally crazy for a lot of reasons. I know people disagree, but I just don't think the Russians had anything to gain by killing John F. Kennedy, because we would have been at a war with them. Number one, if we'd found out that they had killed Kennedy, we would have been preaching for a nuclear war. Putting Johnson in there wouldn't have helped him any, because Johnson was more anti-communist than Kennedy, so they'd be putting a worse person in there actually than Kennedy. Yeah. Besides, Kennedy and Khrushchev were starting to patch things up at the time when Kennedy was killed, so that's another reason why I don't believe Khrushchev would have killed him.
Well, what theory do you think holds the most weight? I mean, who would you go with if you had to pick?
Well, I think there's a ton of evidence that supports people connected with the CIA having to been involved in some form or fashion, and we can go into that in more detail. It's not like I just dreamed up that theory. I mean, there's actually a lot of hard evidence that supports it. The mob, of course, with Jack Ruby killing Oswald, there's a link right there with organized crime with Ruby.
Right.
Nobody disputes that Ruby was mixed up with the mob. Everybody knows that. That's been proven many times over.
Yeah.
So why would Ruby be killing Oswald unless there was some mob connection there? There were anti-Castro Cubans, in my opinion, because there was an incident in late September of '63 where two anti-Castro Cubans and Lee Harvey Oswald were seen at the front doorstep of a woman named Sylvia Odio, who is still alive today in Dallas. And she's testified over the last 50 years about this one incident. And every conspiracy person says it's the strongest evidence of a conspiracy if they had nothing else to hang their hat on. This is the one thing that anti-conspiracy people cannot explain away easily. What happened was Sylvia Odo was an anti-Castro refugee from Cuba. She'd come from Cuba. Her family had fled there from Castro. She was settled in Dallas. And in late September of '63, three men showed up at her front doorstep of her apartment in Dallas unexpectedly. She had never met these men before, never seen them before. To this day, she doesn't know why they picked her apartment out. That's also suspicious. But two of the men were anti-Castro Cubans, and one was an American, and she got to look at all three of the men's faces because they were standing right at her doorstep. She didn't let them in her apartment. She just opened the door and looked at them. And the leader was a guy that called himself Leopoldo, and he introduced the American as Leon Oswald, not Lee, but Leon Oswald.
Yeah.
And then the other guy introduced himself, and then they left after she told him she couldn't help him. And the next day, or actually the next evening, this Leopoldo fellow called her up on the telephone and asked her about Oswald, and she didn't know what to say about Oswald because Oswald didn't say a word the whole time they stood there. And the Cuban went on and said, the ex-Marine, he's a sharpshooter with a rifle, and he said that we Cubans should have killed Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs, and he's kind of a crazy guy, and then he hung the phone up. And she didn't know what to think about it at the time, and until Kennedy was killed and she saw Oswald on television after he was arrested, and she recognized Oswald's face on TV as the man that was with those two Cubans. So she's never been discredited in 50 years. Nobody's ever been able to show that she's making a story of her lying. And I believe her, and most researchers believe that she's telling the truth because she has no reason to make this up. In fact, her sister witnessed it, who was in the apartment, so her sister backed her up on it as well, that these men were at her front doorstep. So here we have an incident where we have two men, two of whom were anti-Castro Cubans who hate Kennedy apparently, who talk about killing Kennedy on the telephone the next day, and they're with Lee Oswald for some reason. Now, that's to this day has never been totally explained.
All right. Now, also in your book, and this is where we can discuss something that I kind of disagree with the book, and that is you have multiple shooters, and that you have something about 5 shots that went on, and I think that most of the evidence suggests that there were 3 shots, and that
well, not actually. The House Committee in the 70s came up with a scenario where they believed there were 4 shots fired because of the acoustics evidence. Robert Groden, who's one of the leading experts in the world on the assassination, who's a close friend of mine, was on the panel on the committee in the 70s, and so that's how I know this because I talked with him about it. And he said that the acoustics evidence actually picked up 5 distinct acoustical fingerprints or bullet sounds of shots that they picked up on the tape, where they believe there were at least 5 or somewhere around the 4 or 5, but 4 for sure, but maybe 5 actual distinct bullets were fired. So if he's correct and the panel is correct, then the 5-shot scenario is not totally wrong.
Well, I know, but I thought that some of that acoustical data was questionable and had been there was some controversy about that and challenged.
It's been challenged by experts on both sides, but I'm not saying it's correct or not correct, but if it is correct, then there were 4 or 5 shots fired, not 3. So, but I like to go into the evidence that supports why I think there were 5 shots too. So.
Right. Well, I think there were 3 shots, and we have good data for that. And one of the things that you also talked about was Kennedy was shot 3 times instead of 2 times, and that Connally was shot separately.
Right.
Now I think a lot of evidence suggests that all shots came from the book depository and came from one area.
That's not right. I disagree with you. And the reason why is there were 54 eyewitnesses who were standing there, many of whom I've interviewed over the years, that saw the assassination. They witnessed it, and all these people said, not one or 5 or 6, but 54 people said that the fatal shot that killed him came from behind the fence on the grassy knoll, not from the book depository. Now, I realize that eyewitness testimony is not the most reliable testimony, but you just can't ignore that many people saying they heard a shot from there. Jean Hill, who was one of the key witnesses that was standing there, she's deceased now, but I talked to her many years ago, and she ran up there immediately because she saw the shot come from the knoll. She saw the flash of the gun go. According to her, she saw the flash of the gun go off behind the fence and saw Kennedy's brain blow apart right in front of her, and she ran up there and was put in a chokehold by a man who said he was an FBI guy, and she was told to get out of the area. The first officer that ran up there smelled gunpowder in the air, so, if there's no shooter up there, where'd the gunpowder come from? The momentum of the transfer momentum of the brain matter from Kennedy's head, when you look at the Spreaker film, a lot of the material goes on the rear of the car, where Jackie went on the trunk of the car to pick up a piece of the president's head. Not only that, but 22 doctors in Dallas, 2 of whom I became good friends with and actually talked to personally, all said, and this is every doctor without exception said, there was a massive exit wound in the rear of Kennedy's head that they observed in the operating room. And Dr. McClellan, who I know very well, was standing right over Kennedy for 30 minutes. He had the best view of Kennedy's head wound of any of the doctors, and he told me there's no doubt in his mind that the bullet that hit Kennedy came from the front and blew out the back of his head. If they're correct, and I have no reason to doubt 22 surgeons, then the bullet that killed him didn't come from Oswald, it came from the grassy knoll.
Yeah, well, a lot of those doctors have actually recanted and had said that that they had.
No, they haven't either.
Well, they
I've
actually have been
with all of them over the years, and every one of them backed this up. Yeah. Robert Groden even showed them the autopsy pictures that he had from the committee that showed the back. The autopsy pictures even proved this. The autopsy pictures showed the back of Kennedy's head blown out.
Yeah, I disagree with that because I've seen the autopsy pictures as well, and that's not the case. Also, the trajectory of the brain matter actually goes mostly forward. And, of course, a headshot like that would go in all directions, but most of the trajectory
how do you explain the Harper fragment? Though the Harper fragment was found by Billy Harper the day after the assassination. He was a TCU student that walked through Dealey Plaza, and he found a piece of Kennedy's occipital bone, which is the back of your skull, on the grass 30 feet to the left and rear of where Kennedy was shot the day before.
Well, that's been disputed as well.
Well, no, it's not disputed.
Yeah, it has been.
Who disputes it?
Well, I think there were a lot of doctors at the time that examined that and didn't place it at the back of the skull.
The pathologist said it was from the back of the skull. He took it. His dad was a doctor. He took it to his own father in Dallas, and his dad took it to a pathologist there in Dallas, and they definitely identified it as occipital bone, which is the rear of your head, not the front part. Well, so that's another thing that proves the shot came from the front.
I'm reading a lot of stuff that claims that that's not necessarily true. Now, you're aware of the reenactment that they did with the single bullet that shot Kennedy in the back through his neck, hit Conley?
Yeah, I've seen those reenactments, and a lot of them aren't even accurate. Groden's even told me about those. He's going to dispute all that in his new book that's coming out. I mean, the single bullet theory is impossible for a lot of reasons. First of all, no bullet has ever been fired from Oswald's rifle in tests that went through a cadaver's wrist that came out looking like CE-399, the bullet, the magic bullet. They have fired bullet after bullet after bullet into dead cadaver's wrists to try to simulate what happened to Connolly when his wrist got destroyed by the bullet. And there's not one bullet, and Cyril Weck said this, he's the leading pathologist on the case. He said that the day they come up with a bullet that can duplicate what the magic bullet did, then I'll end my criticism. And they cannot ever come up with a bullet that comes out looking like the pristine bullet that they found on that stretcher. I mean, it's impossible.
They actually did in that reenactment where they shot.
Not in these tests with these cadavers. They haven't.
Well, yeah,
every one of them is deformed.
They actually shot the same round and the same type of rifle into a log, and the bullet came out almost pristine. Now,
we're talking about a human bone, not a log, though, that they've done tests with.
I know, but the density is similar.
Oh.
Now, if you look at the actual picture of that bullet, it is deformed, and it's deformed very much like the one that shot into the log.
Well, actually, the front of it's totally pristine. It's not flattened out at all.
Don't say pristine. It's not totally pristine. But anyways, there is some deformation. There is some deformation there, and in that reenactment, they shot through the ballistic gel, hit the neck bone, went through Kennedy's neck, went into Conley. It did the keystone.
First of all, the bullet that hit Kennedy didn't go in his neck. We know that for a fact because we have the autopsy pictures that show where the bullet hit him. It was several inches below his neckline, and his coat and his shirt prove where the bullet went into. It was not in the neck area. So that's That's number one. I mean, we have hard proof of where the bullet hit him. There's no way a bullet coming down from the book depository could have gone into the back of Kennedy's back and come up and gone out of his neck. The doctors that did the surgery on Governor Connolly, Robert Shaw, and the other doctor, both said, in their opinion, it was impossible for one bullet to have gone through both men. And these are doctors that worked on Connolly. They should know. They were in the Army. They treated bullet wounds all the time. And this was a chest surgeon that said the trajectory didn't even line up properly. So, these are doctors that are even saying it's impossible themselves.
Well, yeah, and doctors have never been wrong. Now, the other thing we're looking at, we're talking about the magic bullet because that's the main thing we're talking about here. You also interviewed Marina, right? Marina Oswald?
Yes.
Now, what does she have to say about all this?
Well,
and how's she doing? I mean,
she's still alive. She lives in Dallas, out in Rockwell, which is a suburb of Dallas. And I talked to her for about an hour. Me and Vincent Bugliosi, who's a well-known attorney and prosecutor, he and I met her together, and we talked to her together. She's an interesting woman. We talked about the whole thing, and of course she believes it was a conspiracy. At first she didn't believe that. She thought maybe Oswald had done it, and then over the years she's been convinced a lot of the evidence that's come out that he was the fall guy. And so today she believes he didn't fire any shots at all, and that he was the patsy for whoever did it. So that's her main belief right now. She doesn't know who killed Kennedy, but she believes that Oswald was being used by some higher power, either an intelligence agency or somebody inside the government that was manipulating him, because he would come and go at times and not tell her where he'd been. He lived kind of a secretive type of double life, is what she told us, and she still believes that he was set up by whoever did the assassination.
And what's she doing now? She remarried and
she remarried. Yeah, she lives in Rockwell. I don't think she works. I think she just stays at home now. But
she's getting up there. I mean, she's got to be retired. I mean, or at least that age. Where can they get your book?
Well, they can order it from Amazon. They can also order it from or get it from Barnes & Noble stores throughout the United States, and they can get it from the publisher, TatePublishing.com. Those are the three main ways they can get it. It's in Kindle and it's in paperback. We're going to have an audiobook version coming out in a couple of months. So.
Okay, very good. Jack, I had a quick question. You obviously think that Oswald was involved in this somehow. What do you think his involvement was?
I'll tell you why. I don't think he shot any shots at Kennedy, and I'll tell you why. He has an airtight alibi if several people are correct, and I'm not saying that they're correct, but if they are correct, there's no way he could have killed Kennedy. Number one, he was seen in the lunchroom at 12:15. That's 15 minutes before Kennedy was shot by a lady named Carolyn Arnold, who signed an affidavit in front of the police department that afternoon saying that she saw Oswald down there at 12:15, and she knew what time it was because they had a clock on the wall in the lunchroom. Now, of course, the clock could have been off, but assuming it's not off, then her timing is what she said it was. The problem with that is that outside in Dealey Plaza, there were people who were waiting for the motorcade to come out, and they were looking up at the book depository while they were waiting, and there was a sign on Hertz Rent-A-Car had a sign on top of the book depository at the time of the shooting, and they don't have it there anymore. They took it down, but it flashed the time and the temperature every few seconds, and the time was always very accurate. And there were witnesses who remember looking up and seeing the time around 12:15, and they saw a man in the sixth floor window with a high-power rifle waiting for the motorcade. And they were curious who this guy was and what he was doing with a rifle. They didn't think he was an assassin. They thought maybe he was a Secret Service or an FBI guy that was up there. But if the timing is correct, and I don't know if it was, but assuming it's correct, then obviously Oswald can't be in the lunchroom and on the sixth floor at the same time. Right. That's one thing. Yeah. Robert Groden also interviewed a lady named Geraldine Reed, who's deceased now, but she was the supervisor in the book depository the day of the assassination. She did not go outside to watch Kennedy. She stayed inside the building, but she heard the shots going off outside. And according to what Groden told me, her timing could be off possibly. I don't know, but I'm just telling you what he told me, that he interviewed her, and she told Groden, she says, I know good and well Oswald didn't kill Kennedy because about 30 seconds before the shots went off, he walked into my office to get change for a Coke for the lunchroom. He always came in there every day to get change for a Coke. He never had change on him, and it was like a habit. Every day he would come in and get change for a drink. And she said the shots went off right after he got change from me, so I know good and well he wasn't shooting at Kennedy because he was down there getting change for me. So they did a paraffin test on Oswald's face later that day to see if he'd fired a rifle, and although that's not totally conclusive, you can't ignore it because the test was negative for nitrates on his face. So there's just lots of things that call a lot of things into question here.
Well, let's get back to your book then. So tell us about your book. I mean, what is sort of the plot and you know, what goes on with that?
The plot starts out in the year 2063 when a new film comes out, which I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but a new piece of evidence comes out that's been locked away for 100 years, and it proves once and for all that there was a shooter firing from in front of the motorcade, and Of course, that reopens the whole mess all up again, and the government, the president at the time, forces the CIA to come clean and tell what really happened on the assassination because they can't hide it anymore because they have this film that proves it.
Right.
And turns out there was a conspiracy that killed the president, and it was hidden away for 100 years because they didn't want to tell anybody what happened because they couldn't tell them. In the book, Oswald is a CIA agent, which I think there's some evidence to back that up. I didn't just put that in there just for imagination, but in my book, he's actually recruited by the CIA and sent over there to the Soviet Union to spy, which there's a lot of evidence to that fact that he really was recruited by our government. And for that reason, they decided back in '64 that they couldn't tell the truth to the American people, which I don't know if that really happened or not, but it's just a scenario out there. That's how the book starts out. Then, of course, the hero finds out about a time machine that's been developed, which who knows if time travel will ever be possible, but in the book it's possible. And he ends up deciding he wants to go back and solve the crime and find out what happened. And so he goes back in time, and in the meantime, the rest of the middle of the book, I talk about how the conspiracy was formed. And of course, these are fictional people that are in the conspiracy, but they're based on some real people. And I put out my own scenario. This is, of course, a lot of this is my own spin on the case.
Sure. I mean,
I can't prove it. I can't prove what I put in the book really happened, but I try to support it with hard evidence. And what I put in the book, I think, is very plausible. And then, of course, the end of the book, I don't want to ruin the book for everybody.
Don't do that.
Okay.
I mean, don't ruin the book. I mean, the ending, because we don't want people to know what happened. But basically, this your main character is an attorney, and it's the 100th year anniversary, 2063.
Right.
Well, how does he get back in time? I mean,
well, I don't. Well, that's
turns
out he's limited by the time machine on how many hours he can be gone, and then it brings him back later.
So there's an ability, some science that allows him to go back in time and stuff. And
I mean, obviously a lot of the book is fiction, but a lot of it's not fiction.
It makes it fun. I mean, it's what you're doing is you're taking some creative license and you're sort of building together information that you've collected.
Are you the attorney that actually is
he's kind of based on me because I'd be the first one that would volunteer if there was a time machine. I'd like to go back and really. I mean, I like to just see what really happened or prevent it.
Are you traveling in time now? No? Okay.
No.
It's hard to say. Have you heard any of the conspiracies? Because Bush was actually around in Texas then.
Senior,
yeah. I haven't gone that far out. I don't think Bush had. I don't think Bush had anything to do with killing Kennedy.
Okay. Yeah,
well, he wasn't quite in the CIA
I've heard
at that time.
But right. Yeah.
I mean, I try to stick to really hard evidence. I mean, I know people disagree with me. A lot of people think Oswald did it, and that's fine. At least what I'm proposing is based on my research and what I think the hard evidence supports. Now, you can interpret the evidence different ways.
Right, and a lot of it's witnesses.
But for people to say there's no evidence of a conspiracy is just crazy, in my opinion, because there is evidence of a conspiracy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to you before you came on the air, and I think Oswald, was the lone shooter. Now, whether he had help or not, I don't know. I mean, he could have had help, and there could have been things going on to.
Well, are you aware about the marksmanship that they tried to do with Oswald's rifle? I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but they did a lot of tests with his rifle. The Warren Commission had their own experts try to recreate the assassination in March of '64, and their own experts couldn't even come close to doing what Oswald supposedly did with his own rifle. I mean, they couldn't even do what he did. There was the top sniper in the United States at the time, or later on, Carlos Hathcock. He was the head of the Marine Sniper School in Quantico, Virginia. He tried to duplicate the assassination with a moving target, and he's the top sniper. I think he's dead now, but he was the top sniper at the time. And he told researchers he couldn't even do what Oswald did in the time frame. So, I mean...
Well, I know, but sometimes you get lucky. And I'm saying that I'm not.
Well, he was lucky, all right.
Well, bad things happen and people get lucky, and even a blind pig finds an acorn once in a while. And so what I'm saying is it's possible that he could have been the lone shooter. Well, it's not impossible. Well, even if you say the best shooters didn't do it, doesn't mean that Oswald couldn't have done it. I mean, you could look at it as weighing one way or the other, but doesn't mean Oswald couldn't have done it.
Yeah, well, there's one of the statistics I always like to throw out to people when they say there's no conspiracy or they think one person did it. And of course, you can argue statistics. I understand that, but this is really hard to refute. I mean, a guy did a study of 78 people who were connected with the assassination in one form or fashion who died over 10 years after it happened. And in the study, he found out that 37% of these people were murdered. I mean, there's no doubt they were murdered. They found out how they died. They didn't die of old age. They were actually killed by somebody. Like 23% died of some kind of accident. 17% supposedly committed suicide, and the rest died of natural causes. Okay, well, all right. So he compared it to the general population of the United States, and he found out that in the United States population as a whole, on the average, about 1% of the population dies from murder every year. About 1% commits suicide, and about the rest of them, 89%, die of accidents or old age. And his whole point was, there's no way in the world that you could have 37 times as many people being murdered on this as the normal population without some kind of foul play being involved here. I mean, there's no way to explain that. That is so off the charts that many people would be murdered that were connected to this, that for it to not be a conspiracy, then all these people, it had to be a pure coincidence, and that's just beyond statistical probability, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you're an attorney. You know how reliable witnesses can be as well.
Right. but how do you explain so many people being murdered? If
Yeah, I don't know. I can't comment on that because I'm not, I don't have the knowledge on all of those. I know that they were trying to make a lot of it out that it was really strange and stuff, and I just don't.
Have you read a book called JFK and the Unspeakable?
I have not.
Well, it's a very good book. I mean, it's a conspiracy book, but it's got a lot of new evidence that just came out recently that supports the CIA being involved in the murder. But anyway, it's a good book. I recommend it. So.
How recent?
It just came out like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay, so really recent.
Yeah. One of the strange deaths that I want to mention that it's hard to explain if there's no conspiracy that this guy brought up in his book. A Green Beret came forward for the first time because apparently what he knew, he didn't realize it was connected to the Kennedy case until 30, 40 years later, but he could be making something up. I understand that, but assuming he's not, he told the author of the book that he was a trained assassin for the CIA during the Vietnam War, and his CIA agent that he worked with came up to him at Fort Bragg, North Carolina in the mid-'60s and told him that they wanted him to kill somebody for them, and he'd already killed several Vietnamese people, and he assumed it was another Vietnamese agent they wanted him to wipe out, and it was an American this time. I'm just rehashing what the book says.
Right.
I'm not vouching for it. But in the book, he claims that he was asked by the CIA to kill a man named William Pitzer. Well, it turns out William Pitzer was the naval commander who took all the photos and movies of Kennedy's autopsy at Bethesda Hospital. He was the one that filmed the autopsy. He took the x-rays and the photographs of Kennedy's wounds. And Pitzer died suspiciously in his lab at the hospital, but right before he was going to retire from the Navy. He had told his family he was going to go public with the Kennedy photos because he said they proved a conspiracy. And then he supposedly shot himself in the head and committed suicide. And the author of the book was told by the Green Beret that he said, I know the guy didn't commit suicide because the CIA wanted me to murder him, to kill him, because they were scared of what he was going to say. And, of course, this is what the book says. Now, I'm not saying it's true, but if it is true, then obviously somebody wanted Pitzer to be killed, and he ended up dead anyway. So.
Sure. Jack Duffy, author of The Man from 2063 on the line here. Jack, you've kind of mentioned some of this, and we've touched on it, but you mentioned that you think the CIA being, the
well, I think it's more rogue CIA, to be honest with you.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask was some of the evidence.
In your book, that's what you talk about too.
Right. I think people who killed him were not necessarily high up in the CIA. I think it was done maybe outside the CIA's knowledge by people who worked for them that just decided to do it on their own, along with the mob.
Yeah.
That's my own personal opinion.
Right. And that's what you sort of portray in your book, too, as a little
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a guy named David Phillips who was the head of the CIA's assassination program for the Western Hemisphere. And Phillips was in Dallas on the day of the assassination, coincidentally. He's dead now. But Phillips was seen with Oswald, according to a Cuban who came forward and was interviewed for this book I was just telling you about. This Cuban claims he saw Phillips and Oswald talking in a lobby of a Dallas hotel several months before the assassination. And he recognized Oswald, and that's why he said it was Oswald. He saw him on television. He said, I remember seeing this guy with Phillips. And what they were talking about is we don't know. But it's very strange why a guy like Phillips, who's high up in the CIA, would be talking with anybody like Oswald, especially Oswald, right before the assassination. So, I mean, there's like where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, you just can't totally disregard all these coincidences. Yeah, everything's got to be a coincidence if there's no conspiracy.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that if what came out publicly, at least from the administration, happened, I mean, we had a president, somebody people loved, that was shot with a once in a lifetime, if that chance shot. Everything just came together, perfectly, and it's either that or it was a conspiracy. So I think that's what's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around too.
Is that now you have to say, you're looking at it from a point of view. You've done all this research, but is it possible he could have been acting alone, and could he have been the shooter?
Well, not in my opinion, but I mean, I don't think it's possible he even did it at all. If these people are correct about seeing him in the lunchroom and other people seeing the gunman on the 6th floor at the same time, so I don't know. I mean, if they're correct, there's no way Oswald could have been up there to even shoot Kennedy. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, nobody knows the whole answer on this thing. We just all we have is pieces of evidence, and we're trying to piece it together. But I mean, I'm not saying Oswald wasn't involved in the conspiracy, because I don't know. He might possibly have been part of the conspiracy, and then they double-crossed him and used him as the fall guy and then had him killed. I mean, that's one possibility. We get into the Tippit shooting. I'm sure you're aware. He got arrested for killing a police officer.
Right.
And of course, a lot of people like to think that's an open and shut deal, where no doubt Oswald killed Tippit. But there actually is a lot of doubt about whether or not he actually killed Tippit too. I mean, I know you may find that hard to believe, but there is evidence that points to maybe other people being involved in that murder.
Now, wasn't that the only murder he was charged with at the time before he was killed?
He was arrested for killing Tippit originally, not for killing Kennedy.
Right.
And then they tied him to Kennedy later that day when they found his gun on the 6th floor.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've just got a couple minutes left before we go to break. Anything you want to wrap up and talk about it? I did enjoy the book. I will recommend it. It's interesting. It's well written, and it's a good story. I don't necessarily agree with everything, but it's a lot of fun. And if you are somebody that enjoys the Kennedy assassination involved in conspiracy, you do tie a lot of things together. So.
Yep. I'd like to talk about some more of the strange deaths when we come back that to me prove there was foul play involved here.
Well, yeah. All right. I guess we have some time. Let's just get into that now, then, if you want to.
Okay.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, there were three key organized crime figures that were murdered in the 70s, right during the time of the House Committee's investigation. All three of these people, one was Sam Giancana, who was the head of the Chicago mob, one was Johnny Roselli, and one was Charles Nicoletti. All three of these people were mixed up in organized crime, and they were all being subpoenaed by the House Committee to come up to Washington to testify on the Kennedy assassination. Giancana was killed in his home by the mob. Somebody killed him, shot him several times in the head right before he was going to be brought to Washington to testify. Roselli was killed about a year later on a boat in Miami when they were getting ready to bring him to Washington, and he was connected with the CIA also. Whoever killed him chopped him up in pieces and put him in a drum and dumped him in the bay, and the only reason why they found his body is because the drum came back up to the surface and a fisherman just happened to find it by accident, but they identified Roselli through his dental records, so they know what happened to him. And then Charles Nicoletti, who was a hitman for Giancana, who was rumored to have been in Dallas at the time of the assassination, was going to be brought to Washington. He was murdered in a parking lot a few months before they could get to him. So all three of these key mafia figures were rubbed out by the mob, I assume, or somebody, right before they were going to be brought to Washington, D.C. So that's very, very suspicious.
Yeah, that really is. That makes you wonder as well. All right, anything else that you want to add? And then we probably won't be coming back with you. We're going to let you go after the break, but we appreciate you being here with us. And
I appreciate being on your show, and I hope people will read the book and enjoy it.
Yep, and they can get it at Amazon, at your website. What's your website?
Yeah. It's themanfrom2063.com.
Okay, and they can find out more about the book and about you and all that stuff there as well.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, we want to thank Jack Duffy, the author of The Man from 2063. It was a pleasure talking with you, and now you've got me curious now, darn it. Now I'm going to have to do some more research.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Maybe we can do a follow-up later on, because there's a lot of other stuff that we didn't have time to talk about tonight.
And are you working on another book? Or are you?
Yeah, actually I am.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with Kennedy. It's about a couple of Navy SEALs who are James Bond-type agents, I suppose, for the American government, and they're fighting a massive global terrorist organization. But that's about all. I don't want to go into details. I haven't copyrighted anything yet.
Okay, well,
sure.
But that's pretty much
when you get that going, you can email us, and maybe we'll have you back on, and we can promote that and talk about that book.
Okay.
Love to have you back. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Thank you, too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we'll be back. Remember, you're listening to At Odds, and it is a call-in talk show, so you can call us at 248-455-6337.
Red State Talk Radio.
The idea of government taking over healthcare is enough to make you sick.
The conservative voice.
I will never forget the day my son Jeremy told me he hated me and slammed the door in my face. I'm behavioral therapist Janet Lehman. Behavior problems can turn the child you love and your life into a nightmare. That's why my husband James and I created the Total Transformation, the step-by-step program that shows you how to fix the worst behavior problems and get your child to respect and listen to you again. No matter what the behavior, defiance, backtalk, angry outbursts, disrespect, we can help you stop it. Now you can get the Total Transformation for free. All you need to do is get the program and let us know how it works for you. You can keep it forever for free.
Limited number of free programs available. Call now. 1-800-257-2873. 1-800-257-2873. 1-800-257-2873. That's 1-800-257-2873.
Great shot, Bob. I think you're on.
I just followed your lead.
Hey, by the way, did you break ground on your new building?
No way. I'm holding off until I see what the future holds.
So you're seeing a fortune teller?
You know what I mean. Things look a little uncertain.
The only thing certain in business is if you're not growing, you're losing. And we just opened our 5th facility last week. If you're following my lead, you'll call General Steel. Their pre-engineered steel buildings could save you as much as half the cost compared to conventional buildings. And they're up in nearly half the time, and backed with a 50-year structural warranty.
Yeah, but steel buildings...
Hey, you've seen my building. Does it look like steel?
No, it looks great.
Ask about rebates that could save you up to $20,000. Look, you can stop paying rent and own a building that suits your business better and probably saves you money by operating more efficiently. In times like these, don't stop spending, just spend wisely.
800-398-8309, 800-398-8309, 800-398-8309, 800-398-8309.
Red State Talk Radio.
Why spend more than you have to on your life insurance? Did you know that term life insurance rates have fallen over 60% in the last 15 years? At the Life Insurance Quote Line, we monitor the rates, features, and financial strength of hundreds of life insurance products. For example, a healthy 40-year-old can protect his family with $500,000 of 10-year level term for less than $20 a month. Rates for women are even lower. And don't forget to ask us about the new term life policies that guarantee your money back even if you don't die. Since 1986, we've helped tens of thousands of people just like you save a fortune on their life insurance. Why not find out how much you can save? Write down this number and call today for your free quote. 1 5-minute call is all it takes. Call 800-610-3497. 800-610-3497. That's 800-610-3497. Rates, policy forms, and availability vary by state.
And we're back, and you're listening to At Odds with Nate and Brian. Remember, it's a talk show, 248-455-6337. Hey, it was great talking to Jack. I mean, that was an interesting show.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
You loved it.
I did, and I think we will have to have him back on.
Yeah.
He had a lot more to talk about, and, I mean, there's just so much involved in the JFK assassination, and it's fascinating to a lot of people because nobody really knows.
If we have him back, I'm going to have to do more research, I think, now.
You can, or just believe what he says.
I'm not going to do that.
No, I mean, he's put a bit of research in.
He has, and
40 years.
And I disagree with some of it, but that's fine. I mean, that's what
makes it interesting. If it was cut and dry, it wouldn't be.
Right, yeah.
Right?
It's like saying, the sun's going to come up tomorrow.
That's not cut and dry either.
Yeah. Well,
don't get me started there because it might not.
I would bet your life that it will.
So would I, because if it doesn't...
You would bet your life?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
I don't know if I believe in the laws of physics that well, but... Pretty. I mean, it's pretty.
My thought is, if the sun doesn't come up, we have pretty big problems, and we probably aren't going to make it anyway. We're going to be like the dinosaurs.
So
if I bet my life, I
willy-nilly,
I don't lose.
Bet your life on that?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Anyways, I got a presidential quote for you. You didn't want to do it. This is a tough one, but I thought it was applicable because the advice that this man said, so many years ago.
It was a man.
It was a former president.
That narrows it down.
I don't know if we've got any female presidents.
Several, but okay, go ahead.
And wise words even then, and they can apply today, especially in the situation about gun control laws. But this is what he said. The government should not be guided by temporary excitement, but by sober second thought.
I have no idea. Reagan?
No, Reagan didn't say a lot longer than that.
older than that?
Much older than Reagan.
Washington?
Yeah. It was not as
quite
old as Washington. No, you'll never get this. It's a tough
Ford,
one. He's more
Taft.
of the.
Had to be Taft while
It
he
was
was
not
in the bathtub.
It was not Taft. It was.
Okay, I have
no
idea.
It wasn't Polk.
No.
No, it was Martin Van Buren.
Okay. See, I bet
nobody got that.
All of our audience knows that he was a president,
Yep.
but people who don't listen to the show probably haven't heard of his name.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Google
it's an obscure one.
Google it.
Yeah.
Martin Van Buren. I'm not even sure he was an American. Anyways,
you birther, you.
I want to see a document.
Yeah, see your birth certificate.
Nothing online because they can fool that stuff
That's right.
all the time. I want
That's right.
Put it in my
That's right.
put it in my hands. Hey, the NRA Commission study supports. They came out with a report. Supports having armed guards in school. They said they were going to do that. They're working with the, some kind of armed security program. What's his face with so and so, and yeah, I've got all kinds of knowledge. But anyways, they came out with it. I think today, and I just wanted to read a couple of quotes by some really intelligent people.
All right,
and this is what Marion Wright Elderman had to say.
Oh, good.
Today's report is nothing more than a continuation of the NRA's attempt to prey on America's fears, saturate our schools with more guns, and turn them into armed fortresses, said Marion, who is the president of Children's Defense Fund. Yeah, I don't know what they plan on doing. Oh, I know what it is. Ban all guns. It must be soundly rejected, she said. And, of course, Representative Elijah E. Cummings, Democrat from Maryland, said he's sponsoring the federal gun trafficking bill. Said he was skeptical about armed guards in schools. Having more guns in schools, I don't think is necessarily the answer. He said, but any jurisdiction that wants to take care of their kids in that way, I think that may not be a bad proposal. So, well, he's sending a mixed message there. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Well,
and surprisingly, what you just read in the zero context that you gave me, I think that's a fine statement.
Well, he said it at National Press Club.
You don't necessarily have to think that it's the best idea to have armed guards in schools as long as you support the right of individual local school districts to have armed guards in their schools. And it sounds like that's what he's doing. Personally, I'm okay with that. I think he's wrong because I think it's obvious that armed guards in schools could do some good and will do no or very little harm ever.
I was reading the article, and they said there was already hundreds, if not thousands, of school districts that already have armed police and or armed guards in their schools already.
We had a resource officer, and no mass shootings in there. So I think that's proof, right?
Well, absolutely. I don't think we need any more done. Sign it, seal it, deliver it.
I just don't understand this constant message from the left that more guns in school aren't the right thing to do, and the NRA just wants armed fortresses. Well, do you not want your children in an armed fortress if somebody's trying to kill them?
Yeah.
Wouldn't an armed fortress be a good place to be when somebody's attacking you from outside of the armed fortress?
Well, I don't know. I would think so because, I think that's good. That's basically what an armed fortress is to.
That's the point of an armed fortress.
Protect the people inside. But when you hear other people say, I don't believe in guns, that if I was being murdered, I'd just let them murder me because I could never do anything to hurt anyone else.
Yeah, that we had that lady that she's self-defense is not an option.
Right.
What?
And actually, we had was it Kagan or Sotomayor? Sotomayor, I think, the Supreme Court justice who said that
she's a good one.
She didn't think that you had a natural right to self-defense. I mean, who the hell would say something like that?
It doesn't make
what
any
is
sense.
The mindset of someone who says you don't have the right to protect yourself? I mean, where does that come from?
Every animal, well, I shouldn't say every animal,
just
but just about every animal will try to protect itself if it's being attacked. It will do something.
Believe me, I've been bit by a lot of animals, and I don't want to tell you why, but they fight back.
I know why. Luckily, you trained that snake to bring frogs back to you.
It
though,
did.
So that was good.
But only for a sip of Jack Daniels.
It was good.
That's
No,
another joke.
It happens.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't understand. I think, guns. Personally, myself, I think you know this, and I think you would agree that you should allow, parents and staff that have concealed pistol license to be able to carry in schools. I mean, gun-free zones, in my mind, are killing zones. They're murder zones. It's a come in and kill me sign that's,
That's what I was going to say. People like this, like White, right, whatever her name was.
Marion?
She is sanctioning the murder of our children. When she's supporting gun-free zones, saying get all of the guns out of the school and blaming the NRA for this, she is sanctioning the murder. I mean, that's just how it is. Like you said, gun-free zones are state-sanctioned murder zones.
They live in this fantasy world that they just want to ban guns and they'll just magically disappear as soon as they sign the bill.
Except we have those whole 3D printers things. But I will tell you, I think you are wrong when you say that you want to allow everybody with a concealed pistol license to carry in a school. I don't think that goes far enough at all, because concealed pistol licenses, in my mind, are wrong in and of themselves. I think anybody who hasn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they shouldn't own a firearm, whatever we set that standard at, which should be really nobody unless you're in prison, should be allowed to carry a firearm anywhere they damn well please. And we would have a much safer school system. We'd have safer malls. We'd have safer federal buildings. Cities would be safer. Chicago, a bit safer.
I would think so.
It would be a bit safer. I don't know.
It just makes complete sense to me to take care of this mass shootings in schools tomorrow by allowing people to do that, but
at least mitigate some of the damage, right? I mean, you're never going to stop all crazy people from killing everybody. And I don't think that it doesn't matter what law you pass, that won't happen. And in fact, no law will make that happen or even slow that down. But you could mitigate some of the damage.
Well, that's what Sean Mikulski wants to do in Tucson. He started a program privately funded to train and buy shotguns for people in poor and high crime areas that can't afford a weapon. They've already had $12,000 raised, and they should be training and supplying shotguns to these people within 60 days. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I wish we could do that all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I wish Michigan gun groups would get together and sponsor something like that.
Hint.
I know.
You pulled your money to do an awesome rally in Lansing.
Yeah.
Let's get some money together and give a firearm to an underprivileged family, right? I mean, everybody's in poverty now.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before how gun licensing and
our former
carry
guest,
licenses.
Rick Ector would be something that might like to do that in Detroit area if we could have him.
Are we calling him out on the air right now? Is that Rick? Rick, you're listening. I know you are.
And have him coordinate that, and he could distribute it to people that needed the guns.
That's a lot of
stuff,
responsibility you're putting on him. I think he's a busy guy, but I think
he could help us with
He would
that.
be more than willing to help. Yeah,
and
I would be willing to help too. I mean, I'm not rich, but I could help with some of this, and maybe that's a good idea. Maybe you just roped yourself into it.
I would help, definitely. No problem at all.
Here's the problem I have. I don't like giving away guns because I
know
love
it.
them so
I know
much.
it.
Thanks for the donation.
Ooh, that's a nice gun. That's going to look nice over there.
What I was saying, I don't think I finished my thought. We've talked about how gun licensing affects the poor the most, and the increasing price of ammo and guns isn't helping either, and that's because of the scare of a gun grab. And so, I mean, everything together is making the poor, who are generally in high crime areas, and
how
and
gun
could
control
benefit
laws,
from the gun
control laws favor the rich.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you make a concealed pistol license so expensive. What are the hoops they have to jump through to get it? I mean, it's hard for lower income people to get time off to take the classes.
Yep.
To raise again the $200 or $300 it takes to take the class and to get the licenses. A lot of them are afraid to go to the police and to the counties and stuff to apply for the permits. They can be intimidated by the complicated laws and the forms. Some people may have rough time just reading and understanding filling out the form. So,
yeah, and like I've said, the left has this problem with voter ID laws because they think it's oppressing the minorities and the poor, because the poor and the minorities are too poor and or too stupid to go get a state ID so they can vote with an ID. But when it comes to gun registration and when it comes to gun licensing, why don't we make the poor and the minorities, who they think are too poor and too stupid to get a state ID, let's make them pay all the money and fill out all these forms and do these complicated things to get guns.
They don't seem to have any problem getting food stamps and getting assistance.
Yeah, well, that's because that's easy. Now, have you seen the Obamacare?
They have programs that actually have people, sign it up. They can
have
do
you
the
seen
same
the
thing for
Obamacare
voting.
forms, though? You got like 22 pages of to fill out just to see if you qualify for Obamacare. Who's going to be able to do that?
I don't know.
I mean, people can't do their own taxes on
Not
a
me.
1040 EZ.
Not me.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able, I'm going to need help filling out the form for Obamacare. So, Brian, if you'll help me out with that'd be great.
I have trouble with a grocery list.
Yeah, but you don't ever go shopping.
Well, we're getting close to
neither do I,
the end of the show, but I just want to say real quick, Mississippi, open carry, they strengthen and make clear the law that allows you to open carry. Mississippi's Constitution already makes it legal to strap on a 6-shooter, it says, and walk down the main street. This statute will make it very, very clear, and it goes into effect July 1st. So that's good for Mississippi. Open carry is growing. Get our book. My Parents Open Carry.
I hope the law is a bit more clear than the Second Amendment, because that one apparently was written very poorly.
Very, very rough to understand.
But all right, we want to thank you for listening. We want to thank Jack Duffy once again. Check out his book, The Man from 2063. Get it on Amazon or his website, manfrom2063.com.
Wow, you remember that?
I remember all that, yeah.
Wow, see, you're young and you have a brain. Mine's mushy. But anyways, until then, we want to thank you for listening to At Odds.
Bye-bye.